Plato from 428, 348 BCE. Plato is arguably the most famous and influential philosophical opponent of democracy. His views were heavily influenced by the execution of his mentor, Socrates, by a democratic Athenian jury. Plato's critique is detailed in his work, The Republic. The ship of state analogy. Plato famously compared a state to a ship. He argued that just as a ship's crew would never elect an inexperienced person to be their captain, it is irrational to allow an unqualified populace to govern the state. He believed that ruling is a specialized skill requiring extensive knowledge and virtue, which the average person does not possess. Rule of the ignorant. Plato contended that democracy places power in the hands of the ignorant and uneducated. He feared that citizens would vote based on immediate desires, popular rhetoric, and emotional appeals rather than on reasoned judgment for the common good. Degeneration into tyranny. Plato saw democracy as an unstable and chaotic form of government that inevitably degenerates into tyranny. He argued that the excessive freedom and lack of discipline in a democracy would lead to social disorder. A demagogue, or a popular leader who exploits the passions of the masses, would then rise to power and become a tyrant, restoring order by force. The philosopher king. In place of democracy, Plato proposed a government run by philosopher kings. These would be a small, elite class of rulers who are the wisest, most rational, and most virtuous citizens, trained from a young age to govern for the good of the entire state. Aristotle, 384–322 BCE. While not as vehemently opposed to democracy as his teacher Plato, Aristotle was a cautious critic. In his work Politics, he categorized different forms of government and saw polity as the best practical form, which was a blend of democracy and oligarchy. He viewed pure democracy as a corrupted form of rule of the many for self-interest. The line Aristotle distinguished between correct and deviant constitutions. A correct constitution aims for the common good, while a deviant one serves the interests of the ruleress. He classified democracy as the deviant form of rule by the many, where the poor majority would govern for their own benefit, often at the expense of the wealthy minority, leading to class conflict and instability. Danger of mob rule. He was concerned that democracy could easily devolve into mob rule, or an unthinking, impulsive tyranny of the majority. Preference for polity. Aristotle's ideal constitution, polity, sought to balance the rule of the many with the rule of the few. This system would rely on a large, strong middle class to prevent the extremes of wealth and poverty that he believed exacerbated factionalism and instability in pure democracies. Thomas Carlyle, 1795–1881. A Scottish philosopher and writer, Thomas Carlyle was a fierce critic of democracy and a proponent of what he called the great man theory, the despair of finding any heroes. Carlyle famously defined democracy as the despair of finding any heroes to govern you, and contented putting up with the want of them. He believed that society should be led by great, heroic individuals who are morally and intellectually superior, and that democracy was a cowardly retreat from this ideal. Rule by ballot box. He ridiculed the idea that wisdom could be determined by a majority vote, viewing elections as a meaningless national palaver that substituted true, courageous leadership with empty talk and the whims of the crowd. Critique of equality. Carlyle believed that equality was a false and destructive ideal. He argued that some men are inherently wiser and more capable than others, and that society could only prosper by recognizing and deferring to this natural hierarchy. Alexis de Tocqueville, 1805–1859. While often considered an insightful observer of democracy rather than a strict opponent, the French political thinker Alexis de Tocqueville's analysis in democracy in America is filled with profound warnings about its potential pathologies. He was concerned not with its collapse, but with its inherent tendencies toward mediocrity and social conformity, tyranny of the majority. This is Tocqueville's most famous concept. He argued that, in a democracy, the majority's power could become absolute, leading to the oppression of minorities and dissenting individuals. This tyranny is not a physical one but a moral and intellectual one, where the sheer weight of public opinion stifles independent thought and forces conformity. Soft despotism. Tocqueville also warned of a more subtle form of control he called soft despotism. He feared that citizens in a democracy, so preoccupied with their private lives and material comforts, would willingly cede more and more power to a central paternalistic government. This government, while not tyrannical in a violent sense, would slowly enervate, extinguish, and stupefy the people, reducing them to a flock of timid and industrious animals, with the government as their shepherd. threat to individualism and greatness. He worried that the democratic emphasis on equality would lead to a society of uniform, mediocre individuals, where exceptionalism and a spirit of great enterprise would be discouraged. Vilfredo Pareto, 1848 to 1923. A key figure in the Italian school of elitist theory, Pareto's opposition to democracy was rooted in his belief in the inevitability of elite rule. He viewed democracy as a facade that conceals the true nature of power. Circulation of elites. In his theory, societies are always ruled by a small, influential elite. He argued that the form of government, be it a monarchy, aristocracy, or democracy, is simply the mechanism through which these elites maintain power. Democracies, therefore, are not a rule by the people, but merely a system where one elite is replaced by another in a cyclical circulation. Rule by foxes and lions. Pareto identified two types of elites: the foxes, who rule through cunning, manipulation, and persuasion typical in democracies, and the lions, who rule through force and violence. He saw democratic politics as a contest between these elites, with the people serving as a manipulated tool. Friedrich Nietzsche, 1844 to 1900. Nietzsche's critique of democracy was less about a specific political system and more about the cultural and psychological tendencies he saw it promoting. He viewed it as a symptom of a deeper societal decline. Herd morality. Nietzsche argued that democracy fosters a herd mentality or herd morality. He believed that it promoted the values of the weakest and most mediocre individuals, such as equality, compassion, and security, over the virtues of the strong, creative, and exceptional. Suppression of greatness. He saw democracy as a leveling force that suppressed the emergence of higher men or supermen. Übermenschen. Individuals of great creativity, power, and will. For Nietzsche, a society should be structured to allow for the flourishing of these exceptional individuals, rather than holding them back in the name of equality. Embodiment of nihilism. From Nietzsche's perspective, democracy was an expression of modern nihilism, the belief that life is without objective meaning, purpose, or intrinsic value. He believed that democratic values had replaced older, more heroic values, leading to a shallow, uninspired, and aimless society. H. L. Mencken, 1880 to 1956. An American journalist and social critic, Mencken was a scathing and cynical opponent of democracy. He viewed it with contempt, seeing it as the triumph of ignorance and stupidity. The Bubis Americanus. Mencken's critique was based on his low opinion of the average person, whom he referred to as the Bubis Americanus. He believed the public was easily manipulated and incapable of making rational political decisions. The plain people are a myth. He saw the democratic ideal of the plain people as a dangerous and romanticized myth. In his view, the masses are not wise but are instead driven by prejudice, superstition, and a desire for easy answers. Pessimistic outlook. Mencken had a deeply pessimistic view of human nature and political progress. He argued that, in a democracy, the most competent and intelligent individuals are often discouraged from seeking power, leaving the field open to demagogues and self-serving politicians who appeal to the lowest common denominator. Carl Schmitt, 1888 to 1985. A German jurist and political theorist, Carl Schmitt was a highly controversial figure whose work provides a powerful, if dark, critique of liberal democracy. The friend-enemy distinction. Schmitt argued that the essence of politics lies in the distinction between friend and enemy. He believed that liberal democracies, with their focus on pluralism and endless debate, try to evade this fundamental reality, leading to a weak and indecisive state. Against deliberation, he was skeptical of the democratic emphasis on parliamentary debate and reasoned deliberation. For Schmitt, a truly sovereign power must be able to make a final, decisive judgment, particularly in a time of crisis. He argued that liberal democracy is too paralyzed by internal disagreements to act decisively. The dictatorship of the proletariat. While often associated with the far right, Schmitt's critique of liberal democracy also aligned with some Marxist ideas. He argued that parliamentary democracy was a bourgeois form of government and that true political power required a single, unified will, whether it be of a leader or a dominant class.